So tensions between Israel and Iran are escalating, and that's our top story this bulletin, because Israel has pounded Iran with airstrikes early Saturday. Does this mean that this is now possibly going to become a full-fledged war between Israel and Iran? Now, according to the details coming in, Israel has said that it was targeting military targets in retaliation for the barrage of ballistic missiles that Iran, remember, had fired upon Israel earlier this month. Now, from the ground reports that have surfaced, smoke clearly visible over the city skyline. Explosions were also heard in the Iranian capital, Tehran. Now, there was no immediate information that we can bring you about damage or casualties, but the Israeli Defense Forces framing these strikes as a defensive move to counter relentless attack by Iran and also by Iran's allied proxies, which are the Hamas, Houthis and Hezbollah. Focusing right now, as IDF says, is Iranian military. Now, amid this, the White House has said that the President of the United States of America, Biden, is right now being briefed regularly with updates coming in about this escalation.
I can now confirm that we have concluded the Israeli response to Iran's attack against Israel. We conducted targeted and precise strikes on military targets in Iran, thwarting immediate threats to the state of Israel. The Israel Defense Forces has fulfilled its mission.
All right, so with the big news coming in and the confirmation that Israel has struck Iranian military targets for now, Iran's foreign ministry, correct myself, Iran's foreign ministry has issued a statement. I first quote it here. Iran has said, entitled and obligated to defend foreign aggression, is what Iran has said, adding, I quote it here, capable of defending Iranian people. And this is amid the confirmation of the strikes that have come. But remember, does this mean that if Iran strikes back at Israel, will it be in a manner much stronger and sharper against Israel? Are we looking at now not a multi-pronged war for Israel with Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, but also an official full-fledged war between Israel and Iran? So that is the big news coming in. Remember, it's been over a year now that there's been heightened escalation in West Asia, specifically since October 7, 2023. But a year later, while there were a warlike situation already, but now it appears with Iran officially getting involved and Israel striking back, perhaps it looks like this could turn into a bigger regional conflict. I want to go across, and now joining me in this telecast is Amos Yadlin. He's a former head of Israel's defense intelligence. Thank you so much for joining us on that, Ms. Amos Yadlin. My first question to you, what is your understanding about what kind of strikes are these? Because why precisely hit military targets in Iran? Why do you think the IDF has done it?
This is for sure a retaliation for Iran launching 181 ballistic missiles on October 1st to Israel. Israel and any other country cannot tolerate such an attack, which was the largest ballistic missile barrage ever launched in a military conflict at one night. Israel was about to retaliate, took about 3.5 weeks to reach exactly to the plan of attack, and it's happened tonight. The strategic goal was to achieve and to establish deterrence. It was coordinated with the U.S. The U.S. didn't has to approve the attack. Israel independently is deciding, but Israel listened very carefully to the American concern and not to attack energy sites or infrastructure, and not to attack the nuclear sites. But since Iran at least claiming that they attack Israel military installations and the Mossad headquarters on October 1st, Israel has a menu of air defense, ballistic missiles, drones, and other Iranian military target. And I think the interesting question this afternoon is whether it's a closing attack or an attack that will bring an escalation.
So let me ask you that then. What do you think, Amos Yadlin, that do you think this could become a bigger regional conflict? Till now, Israel is battling a multi-pronged, multi-front war, which is with Hamas, Houthis, Hezbollah. But Iran getting directly involved with Israel could actually change the game. Do you think Israel is prepared to face a full-fledged attack by Iran?
Of course. Israel was attacked twice directly from Iran in April 13 and October 1st. And Israel prepared how to deal with Iran in the last 20 years. When I was still in service, we developed the intelligence capabilities and the Air Force capabilities to hit Iran and other dimensions of war. The question is, why Iran, who was behind all the military attacks on Israel, from Gaza, from Lebanon by Hezbollah, from the Houthis, from the Shia militia in Syria and Iraq, why Iran will not pay the price of being behind all this war and all this attack about Israel? Still, I'm saying Israel was limited in its attack tonight, but it gave Iran the idea and the knowledge that they are very vulnerable. Look, Iran fired in April and in October, in 2 nights, more than 500 projectiles, more than 300 ballistic missiles, cruise missiles against Israel, and they hardly achieved anything. Israel, in a very precise attack, not even, I think, 50 munitions, 60 maybe, achieved all its goals and destroy Iran air defense and destroy Iranian factories that produce missiles and rockets that is sent to Russia.
Also, but they recently managed to did strike a location where it appeared that Benjamin Netanyahu and family could be. They weren't. Eventually, of course, that was confirmed, and that they have also survived what looked like an attempt of assassination. But I do have one concern here, that the war is happening, and whether it's Iran or Israel, they are doing what they deem fit to protect their territory. But eventually, what about the hostages? Amos Yadlin, what do you think should happen? What is happening on that front? I understand more details cannot come out, but many are wondering about the women, children, young girls, boys who are still possibly in Gaza. And what do you think? Do you think that also is what time is running out about?
I think you touch the most important issue for me and for many Israelis, because this is our moral obligation to bring these people back from the tunnels and the torture and the sexual harassment and the hunger that they are suffering in Gaza in the hand of terror organization. However, we are now involved in a war in 3 fronts: Gaza, Lebanon, and Iran, and also some other low-intensity fronts from Yemen, Syria, and Iraq. It is time for Israel to use the leverages, the huge achievement since September and October, basically destroying Hamas, killing Sinwar, its leader, the archi-terrorist, the war criminal, then killing all the leadership of Hezbollah and destroying most of their long-range missiles. And what happened this night in Iran, it is time to take this impressive military achievement and transform them into a political.
But that would be my last question here, sir, because while Israel says, or IDF says, that most of the leadership of Hamas, Hezbollah has been now neutralized, but you've headed the Israeli intelligence. You would also be aware that that's not going to wipe out either the Hezbollah ideology or the Hamas ideology, or the Houthis for that matter. That there could be a fresh rise, there could be a continuation of it, there could be the next in line already cropping up. So what do you think then that needs to be done to ensure peace and stability comes to the region?
I think Israel deterrence was re-established and all these organizations that you mentioned will stop the war when Israel will agree to stop the war. But now they are not agreeing on the conditions, on the parameters to stop the war. Israel has now a huge leverage. It can agree to stop the war with the right conditions, both in Gaza, returning the hostages, and in the north, removing Hezbollah from the Israeli borders and able the residents to come back. It is up to the Israeli government to decide that the war objectives were established, were achieved, and it's time to move to diplomacy and to a political resolution. It should be done under fire. It should not be done under ceasefire, because then the enemy will not agree on anything.
Okay.
But I think due to the achievement, and if it will continue the same vector, we can end this war quite in the coming months.
All right, you say it's coming months, but I think it's been a year already. In fact, many years already ongoing back and forth. But we hope there'll be peace and stability. I appreciate sharing your perspective and experience. Amos Yadlin, thank you very much. Our hope for peace for people across the region will continue here from India. Thank you very much for speaking.
Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
India Today's Shivarur, in an exclusive conversation with Adrian Kalaman, who's a terrorism and Middle East scholar, a terrorism expert, and also has enough expertise when it comes to the region, discussing a fresh escalation in this war. What does that mean? Let's listen into this.
Is it possible, Adrian, that direct economic facilities like oil facilities or ports were not targeted, perhaps because the United States, has an election coming up and they wouldn't have wanted that, and also the possibility of an oil terminal being struck would have, more directly possibly triggered a larger kind of escalation with, Russia maybe wanting to, step in some way?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it would have triggered a larger escalation drawing in Russia. I think the Russians are probably upset that the drone and missile factories have been hit because the Islamic Republic has been sending them there. You do bring up a great point. I wouldn't be surprised if pressure came down from the United States not to hit those oil facilities, even though the United States is not an importer of Iranian oil.
Could you give us your reading, Adrian, of what you think might actually happen next? The talk of a disengagement in terms of a de-escalation, some kind of a ceasefire agreement. Do you think that the air becomes more clear towards at least talking about that? Both sides have had their say, quote unquote, with their missiles now. Does the atmosphere become a little more conducive towards ceasefire talks?
I really think it does become more conducive, only because Tehran is absolutely reeling right now. Their number one threat and their greatest threat to Israel has always been Hezbollah, or not always, but in recent years, last 20 something years, it's been Hezbollah, and they've been absolutely decimated. If you look at the Houthis, they've been hit. Does the Islamic Republic resort and go back to war by proxy, or do they go back to this type of terrorist attacks that they're known for, such as hitting Israeli embassies in Argentina or a cultural center in Argentina, or striking targets in India? They have made several attempts in India in the past. So we'll have to see. I would think that the Islamic Republic would want to pivot away from this direct confrontation and move it more towards get it away from the region. It's not going in their favor right now. Hamas is a spent force, at least in Gaza.
Final question, Adrian, in that case is, with the US election just a couple of weeks away now, what kind of bearing do you think that that will have on the way things pan out now between Israel and the forces surrounding it? Do you think it's going to have a kind of calming effect, the election?
That's a great question, and I'm not quite sure, because if you look at the Islamic Republic's strategy, this war against Israel and these attacks, it's also a war against the West. And we know that the Islamic Republic is openly trying to meddle in the U.S. elections. Now, does it benefit them one way or another? I think U.S. being uncertain of who the next president is and how it will influence will work in the Islamic Republic's favor. But any communication coming from Biden, you have to remember he's a lame duck. He's a lame duck president at this point.
Yeah. Adrian Calamel, pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for your reading of this unfolding story. We will keep in touch with you and keep tracking this report. Thanks, Adrian.
So clearly in the Middle East, the war is definitely escalating, and Israel, what it says is Operation of Repentance hit back at Iran, saying the military was conducting strikes against military targets. Iranian media has reported multiple explosions in Tehran and nearby base. Now, United States of America has come out with a threat warning Iran, extending support to Israel, and has said that this response by Israel was proportionate, sending across a message to Iran that it will also continue to defend Israel. America has also said there should be an end of direct exchange of fire between the two nations. But America has also added that multiple direct and indirect channels of communications with Iran were made. The position was made clear in that. And as per Israeli media, 3 waves of strikes took place. The first wave focused on Iranian air defense system. Second and third focused on missile and drone base and the production sites there in the country.
בהנחיית הדרג המדיני תקפנו באופן מדויק וממוקד מטרות באזורים שונים באיראן, בהן אמצעי ייצור טילים אותם איראן שיגרה לעבר מדינת ישראל בהתקפותיה בשנה האחרונה. במקביל, תקפנו את מערכי טילי הקרקע האוויר ויכולות אוויריות של איראן, יכולות שנועדו להגביל את חופש הפעולה האווירי של ישראל לפעולה באיראן. כעת, יש למדינת ישראל חופש פעולה אווירי רחב יותר גם באיראן.
India Today's Gaurav Sawant, in an exclusive conversation with Irina Zuckerman, US's security analyst, discussed America's stance about where it stands and what it intends to do in this war. Let's listen into that.
What are options for Iran now? Ayatollah Ali Khamenei warned in case Israel targets Iran, there will be an intense strike back. 181 ballistic missiles last time. In your appreciation, will there be a bigger response than last time, this time?
Well, that depends on what Israel took down. If they had decimated Iranian Air Force and or degraded their missile and drone capabilities sufficiently, Iran might not be in a position to do any serious retaliation by these conventional means in the near future. They could retaliate by other means, which could include some of their proxies, or they could include cyber attacks and other potential EMP attacks. However, if Israeli airstrikes only damaged some of the facilities and did not fully destroy all of the missile and drone capacity, Iran could significantly increase their future missile air attack against Israel and continue testing Israel's air defense capabilities. We now know that the U.S. placed a THAAD system. This could also mean that U.S. American troops could potentially end up being involved in any future direct attack by Iran on Israel, which is quite undesirable for many reasons. Israel at one point also reached out to the Biden administration about potentially placing a second THAAD system in case a future retaliation from Iran is significantly bigger than the previous attacks, which leads me to believe that the Israelis were concerned that they would not be able to take out sufficient number of missiles, of long-range missiles, and they could continue posing a danger and overwhelm Israel's defense capabilities and even THAAD defense capabilities, which leaves still a lot of room for escalation in the future potentially.
India Today's news director Rahul Kanwal spoke also to Ian Bremmer. He's an American political scientist on this escalating conflict. Let's listen into this expert view as well.
Israel signaled that it will be attacking Iran after Iran's barrage of missile strikes. But now that Nasrallah and Yahya Sinwar have been killed, is that still likely to happen? We know that Anthony Blinken and others are trying to push back against it. What's your understanding of Netanyahu's mind and the Israel Defense Forces?
Yeah, I think it's still overwhelmingly likely to happen, and the targets are likely to be military targets. In other words, not the energy production and infrastructure of Iran. The U.S. in part has increased sanctions on some of the ships that have been avoiding sanctions so far, and that is important because it reduces Iranian export. And the Americans have worked hard to say that the nuclear facilities should be off the target list, and it looks like the Israeli Prime Minister and his war cabinet have accepted that. But certainly after 180 Iranian missiles have been launched at Israel, no Israelis killed in those attacks, but nonetheless a number of military targets hit. The Israelis are going to respond. So I wouldn't take the fact that a number of weeks have passed to make it seem as if the Israelis will let this one slide. That is not the case.
If and when, as you're suggesting, Israel attacks, will that be the end? Because there was a strike by Israel. It's a very limited strike after the first barrage of missiles, and the Iranians didn't really escalate. Is that where this current round ends, or could it get a whole lot worse?
No, I think you're right. That's where this round ends, but the war's not over. As you know, there are still bombs every day across Gaza. There is an effort to evacuate the north, and then the Israelis make that a no-go zone in Gaza. There's, of course, an active war going on in Lebanon. Hezbollah is far more militarily capable than Hamas, though a lot less than they were a few weeks ago before the war started. That is continuing. You still have 100 Israeli hostages. Most of them are likely dead, being held by Hamas. You still have about 60,000 Israelis that have been evacuated from their homes, over 100,000 from Lebanon, and well over 1 million that have now been displaced. So for all of those reasons, there is a lot of fighting still to play out. But the escalation decisions are being made overwhelmingly by Israel, and that is because they have military dominance in the region. Hezbollah has very little they can do to Israel, to the civilians, to the government, or to the Israeli Defense Forces. That is true for the Iranians as well. It puts Iran in a very difficult position. Their most important deterrent vis-a-vis Israel was Hezbollah on the Israeli border, the most powerful non-state military actor in the world, showing that actually they don't have much fist in their glove when it comes to being able to attack the Israelis. If you're Iran in that environment, you really have two choices. You can either engage more with the Americans and try to normalize relations, become a part of the global economy again, or you can try to develop nuclear weapons. And I think both of those options are things that the Iranians are now considering very seriously.
Do you have any sense of when this conflict in the Middle East could end? Is that even possible to determine? Are we towards the end of what happened post the 7th of October last year, or do you think this could go on for a while?
I think the war in Gaza is near over, at least from the Israeli perspective. I suspect that they will announce an end to major military hostilities unilaterally, irrespective of any agreement or ceasefire with Hamas in the coming weeks. And the reason for that is because they just don't have many more military targets to hit. I mean, they've killed the leadership, they've taken out the tunnels, they've taken out the weapons caches, they've killed enormous numbers of fighters, they've killed enormous numbers of civilians. And so they'll still engage in occasional strikes against targets of opportunity, but that's very different from the war. And you've seen that in the numbers of Palestinians in Gaza that have been killed. It broke through 40,000 a couple of months ago, and the numbers are still going up, but nowhere near at the speed they were when you had an active ground invasion across the territory of Gaza. Most of the ground forces that were in Gaza have now been redeployed Some of them are home. Some of them are in the north and fighting inside of Lebanon. But that, of course, is not the way the Palestinians see it. From the Palestinian perspective, you know, their land has been destroyed. Their livelihoods no longer exist. And the likelihood that you'll see a lot more radicalism, a lot more terrorism long-term, generationally, against Israel, against the United States, other targets across the Middle East and more broadly, I think that is something that we're going to be dealing with for a very, very long time.